Hi, I'm Jason Stoddard, and you're listening to The Occasional Podcast.
Set sail with us at the goodbye class. The Occasional Podcast, hear life's broadcast. Riding on the rhythms like yachts upon the bay. Voices in harmony.
Well, you have joined The Occasional Podcast, as you heard in the intro. Special thanks to our friend Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio joining the show today. We'll get to more about that later. So if you tune in to every episode this season, you're going to get a new AI song. And this one, number 2, I think is a very interesting sample of that. Can you guess what the writing prompt was? If you can't, it's there's clues in there in the song. I did put in yacht rock for one. And I want to point out real quick before we move on to other things, I feel like yacht rock, of all the genres out there, is one that AI kind of gets right. I think there's like similarities in the quality or the songwriting that are enough of a common thread that make whatever the equation, the formula as it sits right now, come out with a pretty good dose of yacht rockiness in each one. So obviously it talks about sailing a little bit, but it has a good groove. I think a great bass line. Again, I'm not a huge fan of AI songs, so I think the experiment is still really interesting to kind of note and bring up. But there you have it, intro number 2 of our AI-generated songs. Now, before we get to the main event, I just kind of wanted to drop a couple of things on the platter. We are heading out to Capital Audio Fest. As we speak, I'm packing my bags, putting together my audio show everyday carry bag. I should probably do a podcast or a video on what I bring, but yeah, it's very interesting. And among the items in the bag will be the PTA record weight in copper on sale on the site. You go to About Us and then you drop down to the second item. It says record weight there, and that's how you can buy the PT.audio record weight in copper. It's glorious. Check it out. That's a great way to help support the podcast, the site. It's great for your turntables, and it looks just really cool. We did an awesome patina this year, so check that out. pt.audio.com, About Us, second menu. Also, in DC this weekend, I want to point out our show sponsor for that episode, Doug White of The Voice That Is. He will be showcasing in the Wilson Room. So if you go to Capital Audio Fest with us, you can come find me. I'll be wearing a silly t-shirt and long hair. Be sure to stop by Doug White's The Voice That Is room. He'll be showing so much cool stuff, including Tidal audio, Turnbull audio, cables, Doman audio. He's got a whole list of stuff and a bunch of cool visits from other people in the industry that he represents. So, Wilson Room, first floor, Doug White. Check it out. Now, on to the main event, right? So Jason Stoddard's on the show, and he really covers off on 2 different things. Firstly, he talks about the business and his experience from a business perspective, bringing up Schiit Audio, the changes, the growing pains, his kind of shifting perceptions with how to do things. Then also, he has a very interesting new package. It includes a volume control and some new products that we kind of dive into. But that is the last 17 minutes. So if you want to jump into like the gear announcement stuff where he goes in depth, if you came here for that, the last 17 minutes have that kind of packed into that moment. But at the front here, I wanted to touch on a little harder about what we breeze over on that is this Giga Stack that he's announcing, which is essentially a combination of 3 new products that all launched simultaneously, kind of under the radar this last weekend, the Giga Stack. And the reason I bring it up is because I'm doing all these reviews right now of integrateds that I'm at the $4,000 level. The speakers are, the DeVore Fidelity O96s that are in are up at the $16K level. And I want to also include stories and pieces about stuff that's not so expensive. And this, I think, is probably one of the more expensive things he's done, but also, I think, proposes a pretty unique value. $4,247 for the combination of these things. And that is a new dual mono for $2,000 called the Wonton, a new DAC he calls the Gunyer 2 for $16,000, and then a pre, which is a pre that I've heard quite extensively. That's a tube pre. He also offers it in a solid state. The Freya Plus F for $1,000. That combination pack is called the Giga Stack for $4,247. Now, it is all controlled by the thing he really goes into, which he's very excited about, a remote control system that does a couple of things, but really interesting. clocks in how much wattage is in Class A, which I think is pretty cool. Lets you know when you're in Class A, and also volume control across all the units. Also, we do chat about this briefly. I want to point out up front, the amp, you can turn off the feedback if you want, off and on. It's what your preference is. Not something I see all the time, and something that's usually a decision made by the designer. So a very interesting kind of like last 18 minutes, but he's such a joy to have on the show because he has so many interesting insights. If you're into the industry, if you're into his brand, he really kind of like lets you know his thought process and such. So, as we say every episode, on with the show. Here we go. Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio. Let's do this. Today's episode is brought to you by Focal Name America, a North American distributor. With the collaboration of two industry icons, Focal, the French brand known for high-end audio for home, car, professional, and marine, and Name Audio, the iconic British HiFi brand. Other brands distributed include Musical Fidelity, Thorens, Avid HiFi, Absolutement, BDI, and Vico Acoustic. Visit FocalNameAmerica.com for your home audio and custom installation needs. This episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by Fernan Roby, a hi-fi designer, manufacturer, and dealer in Richmond, Virginia, where they have been producing heirloom quality audio equipment and accessories since 2010. Each Fernan Roby piece is meticulously crafted for you to enjoy your favorite music with friends and family. Follow them at Fernan Roby on all social platforms for a behind-the-scenes look at their process, or visit fernandroby.com to see their craftsmanship for yourself. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. You have reached the Occasional Podcast, and with us today is a recurring character on our path through audiophile. But this gentleman, Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio, is one of our favorite interviews. He's constantly innovating in the space, constantly creating, and I would like to think that you're a very accessible person. You do a lot of live streams. You do a lot of interaction with your people. You take in information from your products. And I have a couple of questions lined up, and then if you stick around at the end, we'll have a few announcements for like new products and such that are coming out. But Jason, how are you today? How are things going for you?
I'm good. I'm a little worried about this recurring character because I now have a vision of it turning into a grand old man of audio, and I'm like, I don't know about that one.
One of the things I kind of wanted to start with in terms of what you've done, because there's been a lot of changes, right, in your company over the last, we've been doing, how long has the company been around? It's like 10, 20 years on the company, maybe now?
Almost 15. We
15,
started
right in the middle.
Yeah. Almost started in June 2010, or we just started in June 2010. And yeah, so June of 2025, we could do maybe a 15th anniversary thing. That's kind of weird, though. I mean, you'd think we'd do something on the 10th, but we'll figure it out.
So you've had this company, and once the company was like settled, let's just say, the wheels are turning, there's a lot of change, right, in the company from nothing to something. Then you get established. Now you have a stable of products. What's the last 5 years been like for you in terms of the amount of change that you've seen in the company as opposed to like maybe that first 10?
It was pretty stable for a while, but massive change the last 2-3 years because we decided to first expand into Texas. Actually moved the production of our small products almost 4 years ago now to Corpus Christi, Texas, from California. Now we've moved the rest of it. The rest of the California operations has moved to San Antonio, Texas. And that's any kind of corporate move is big and ugly, but you're talking 25,000 square feet of production facility, a bunch of people, literally uprooting and moving an entire company. That's huge and painful. But we are actually up and running, and as of just a few days ago, we were producing stuff in San Antonio as well as Corpus Christi. I still don't know if they know where everything is yet, in the shop, but they're getting there. They're getting there. We kept some very key people from California, which is good. Our whole QC team and essentially operations. So we're good. But no one, anyone who's moved recently, you don't want to move. I think you moved recently, didn't you? No one wants to move.
Yeah, to San Francisco. Not my favorite thing. Essential for growth, I think, but not the most fun step in that.
Yeah, and this is actually a little more fun. It seems like, I don't know. I like Texas. Maybe I'm weird. My wife likes Texas. I know she's weird. The vast majority of people who work for us seem to like Texas, so maybe they're all weird. But I mean, look at the name of the company. It seems to have worked out, and I totally understand if people or say, oh, I'd prefer California, or I prefer Texas, or I prefer New York or Florida or whatever. Maybe not Florida right now, at this moment, but just with the hurricane. But it's funny because we've had some people say, oh, you moved to Texas, you're doing the California escape, you're a terrible person. It's like, well, it's funny because our chassis, our transformers, and our boards are all still pretty much made in California. They just come here and they get assembled. So, if you really want to support California, you can continue buying our products because we're continuing to work with our same suppliers.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point. And they're still employing people there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, actually, if you look at the guys who do our chassis and boards and stuff, I mean, there are more people employed there by us probably than we employ here. But we do like the area, and San Antonio is kind of neat because it's having come from the LA area, it's more like Corpus, it's more like a real city. It has an actual downtown, a bunch of wacky restaurants and stuff. Corpus is much smaller and more, more. It's more eclectic, or I'll just say it's weird. And Lisa and I like weird, so we love it. But not everyone here loves it. They want something that's a little bit more akin to where they came from, and so we ended up in San Antonio. But it's a huge change because we went from in California. We didn't own anything. We leased all our facilities. We'd kind of put together a hodgepodge of building, of pieces of buildings to work. Here, we own both of our facilities. Both of them, we built out, how we need them. So we're like here. We're not going anywhere. And that's very different. It also gives us a nice sense of permanence, and it also gives us, to be frank, kind of a basis moving forward that, our rents aren't going to increase every year. They aren't going to decide, hey, it might be time to get rid of them because someone else wants, this space. So we are here, we're stable, and that's good. And it also allows us to look at some things like we might bring some of the boards in-house. We might actually make some of our PC boards in-house, probably for the smaller products. Just anything that's high volume, we need to have a handle on. But other than that, all I can say is we're here, we're producing, and hopefully we'll find everything.
So for those who aren't so well versed in what goes into being a small business owner, can you just kind of lay out maybe a few specific things that directly influence you in terms of the move? So, like, what is the difference from let's not get too political on this, but like just like a raw kind of fact. This is easier in Texas than it was in California, and just like maybe one point for people who don't really understand how small businesses work in that kind of way.
Yeah, and we can be real balanced. We don't need to make this super political. Here's a fact: it's easier to do things in Texas. We have one supplier in California who's still trying to get through the permits for a powder coating line. Powder coat is basically it's dry paint that attaches to a chassis electrostatically, and then they bake it. It's one of the most environmentally innocuous things you can imagine. But they've been fighting with all the various agencies, and right now I think they're even having a problem maybe even getting a gas line into the building so they can run the ovens. If they can't get a gas line in, it's not like they can switch over to electric ovens. And I keep telling this poor guy, I said, in Texas you would have been running 2 years ago when you started, this process. So he would have been up and running, our supply would have been better, his costs would have been lower, so things like that. It's easier. And that doesn't mean, you can just set up a nuclear reactor in your backyard and dump, liquid waste into the ocean. But it's easier to get things done, and especially if you're outside of a city, in the county, so to speak. Heck, Lisa and I are building a house. It took us 7 years to build a house in California. It required constant supervision of the city. Here it's going to take just under a year, and they, basically there's nothing other than you have to get a driveway permit, a septic permit, and interestingly, a dark sky permit. They're actually real serious about like, hey, we want to be able to see the stars and stuff where we are. And I'm like, cool, that's great. And the dark sky one was the only one with real teeth, where the guy came out and he's like, okay, what are you really doing? We don't want you screwing this up. So it was kind of funny. And you see the same kind of thing in Corpus. They really care about the beaches and some things like that. But it's easier to do things in general. But it's also harder to find some of the suppliers that we have in California. Why are we doing, transformers in California? Well, that's more inertia. That's a guy that we've had for a long time. They actually have offices in Texas as well. Why are we doing chassis in California? Because we've been looking, and we can't really find anyone here to do the consumer level, very complex stampings that we actually are doing in California. Talking to some guys in Minnesota, but it's really just, we don't want to change suppliers just for the heck of it or for price, but a lot of our delays have been waiting for products. And when you have one supplier doing pretty much all your stuff, and they're sitting trying to get a powder coat line going, and they can't, you end up with delays. And that's the real reality of small businesses. Everything affects you, and you really get to feel it.
Real talk, Jason. I don't know if I've ever asked this very specific question, but you do a lot of your manufacturing, as you just said, in the U.S., that's with great intent. That's not an accident.
Yeah.
I know you probably haven't spec'd all this out. I'm pretty sure you haven't. But in your best guess, how much money, percentage-wise, do you think you would save moving all your production to China?
That's tough, because whether it's China or whether it's the U.S., everyone who has a small business knows sometimes the first quote you get is not what it ends up being. But if you go by essentially an initial quote, you could probably save easily 50 to 75% on chassis. 50-ish% on transformers. You could, boards, I don't know. The problem is we use a lot of parts that are specific and come here. Some of them we can't even really ship overseas. So that it's a mess, but you could probably, if they could produce the board, oh boy, it'd be way cheaper. I'd prefer not to, just because if there is a problem, I really don't want to get on a plane and go to China. I don't even think that'd make any difference. This way we know all of our guys. We can talk to them frankly. They know if they've screwed up. We know if they've screwed up, and we all work together and make it good. So that's the way we prefer to work, and and we're still keeping things fairly inexpensive. I don't think I can make a $49 headphone amp, but I can do one at just over $100, and I think that's pretty good.
Most people probably listening to this podcast, they hear those numbers and they'll be like, "Whoa!" I don't think would be much argument from the hardcore audiophiles that what you produce is very cost conscious. I don't think. I mean, the high end doesn't even bother with stuff that low. $50 is not. Won't get you anything in the high end. Not even a cord or a cable. Okay, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that about you, that you're thinking about a broader spectrum, right, of people and impact, and you have some sort of design direction for your company. I wanted to just kind of revisit the fact that you are the type of individual that builds their own house. You said you did it in California, and you're doing it again in Texas. Now, I think the listeners should know that I know a wide breadth of people, different types, and I think I know kind of a lot of people. I've met a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people. Of all the people I've ever met in my existence, you're the only one who has chosen intentionally to build their house. My question for you is, what about that part of you encompasses how you approach your company? That's like a lot of labor. It's just as easy to buy someone else's labor and do it. You know, maybe a little bit easier to just buy and do something in China. Why do you pick that path? And are you like a big journey instead of end game guy? Is like the journey important to you, or is it something else about that process that appeals to you and or you think has value in some way?
It's a great question. I never really thought of it being connected, honestly. A lot of it is just either being stubborn or crazy. And to be frank, I'm not building the house yet. We have contractors that are building the house, and the main reason that kind of led us into that is my wife and I have a lot of stupid hobbies and stupid cars and stuff like that. So we needed a very specific, type of house. And I wanted to have a view, and so that, led us into something in California, which actually led us into something here, which is similar. And I swear that when we have the housewarming and the neighbors come by here, I'm probably just going to, let them, beat up on the dumb kid, which is me. Because, they're all kind of like, why are you building on the side of a hill? It's like, because I'm stupid and stubborn, and that's what I wanted to do. But why are we building stuff in the U.S., rather than farming it out? I think it's more cut and dried there because this is something we're familiar with. We believe it actually results in more close coupled, ability to change things, to have higher quality, to support our stuff. So that's why we're doing it here. And to be honest, we're familiar with it. I am unfamiliar with going to China and saying, "Hey, I would like you to make an X, like this." I know other companies that do it. I've heard the good and the bad. I've heard good. It can be inexpensive. It can be high quantity, high margin, etc. And the bad, where it's like, oh, well, all of them have the wrong, value of capacitor in them or something like that.
Right.
And, anyone can screw up. People in the U.S. can screw up. It's just that, in our case, it's like, well, you either fix them here or send them back to California and they get fixed. So it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, I guess it's kind of being stubborn, a little crazy. We've had a lot of people comment. It's like, wait, you're building a second house? You want to do this again? I'm like,
right.
Yeah.
Like you didn't learn from the first time that it was a. This is what I'm saying is you weren't dissuaded, you weren't discouraged by the long tail production time of the first house. You went in, did it again. Like it's almost like you call yourself crazy, but I think that maybe there's a nugget of like do you appreciate the exercise at least some, or is it?
I do. I really like it. I mean, the first one we had an architect, do it, who was an old mid-century guy. Like, he actually did mid-century homes. And the new one, I actually took a lot of his ideas. I designed the new one. And that's another, that's another thing. It's like I was able to go, no, I want it literally like this. And yeah, that's the other thing is it's the precision of being able to say, this is what I actually want. I don't need to change it later, or I don't need to go, well, what do I do with the 3 extra bedrooms and not enough spaces for cars or whatever. But it's different because we are more out in the country here. So, we're doing a rainfall capture solar house on a septic system. So that's way different than California. And yeah, that's another thing you can do in Texas. You can do rainfall capture. I know in LA they're kind of like, no, the rain is ours, we own it, so you can't do it. And I'm like, I don't know. All governments are weird in one way or another. Just go, okay, let me know what to do, and we'll do it.
There's a very tragic story, I feel like, about just trying to build a house in California. And there's a gentleman I met who he built a house. It was very expensive in a very expensive area. And then there was a problem with it because it didn't seem like it was built that well. And then he had to move out. He was away, and he just had a bunch of money, and he threw a bunch of more money at it, and he got a second house that was not built very well. During the pandemic, he couldn't find a group of guys that would stick around long enough to do a quality job because the demand was so high. People were just like either doing a bad job or saying, here, I do a good job, but I got to go do another job. It's going to pay more, whatever the situation. It was just very difficult with contractors to get quality work.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, smart people probably buy houses that have been built a few times. Like the contractor has built a few of them. 50 would be fantastic, but at least build them a few times so they can go, this doesn't really work so well. We're gonna change this and this and this. If you're talking full custom, especially if it's like on a hill or something, that's a prototype. And let me tell you, I do not want to have any of our prototypes on my desk because those things can catch on fire. They can do all sorts of really horrible things. They can blow up your headphones, because prototypes are not fully worked out. And so if you're going full custom, you got to know, well, it's going to be prototypey. And hopefully it's in the, just the cosmetics or something stupid or whatever, and not like, structurally it's got a problem. But a great example actually happened to both houses. They're like, how do you get the AC from here to there? And I'm like, well, that's not in the plans. They're like, well, it is, but it's different on two views, and it doesn't really work that way. I'm like, that's nice. So soffits or whatever. And we ended up with, a couple of extra little soffits to hide some ductwork on both houses. So luckily, neither of them appear to be sliding down the hill or anything. But so yeah, I'll take that. But it's prototypey. It's not worked out fully, and there will be surprises. And that that's why I tell people it's like our head of production, he just bought a new place up in San Antonio, and he's like, yeah, I'm just going to get a house that someone else owned. I'm like, that's the smartest thing to do. Really? He says, I'll modify it if I want it. I'm like, that's, again, smart thing to do. Yeah.
I like to go back to this thing because I have not seen this before. You've done what you called the Thunderdome. It's a Mad Max reference. It goes back to the idea that a certain amount of things enter and only a certain amount of things enter an arena and less come out. That's pretty unique because there's a certain amount of risk involved from you saying, I'm going to do this R&D and throw something to the wind. What are some of the products that you have produced in your mind that didn't really work out, and what have you learned from that experience? So you don't have to name specifics, but you could just say, generally, what have you learned from the things that didn't do well in the market? Is there anything there that might surprise people that know your products and know you pretty well?
Oh yeah, no, and honestly, I can name names. I mean, I figured that when we did the first Thunderdome, it was for preamps, and we did 4 preamps all at once, and it came out pretty much the way I expected. People liked the tube preamps, and people liked the more expensive one best. We didn't end up with 1; we ended up with 2, and then paradoxically, we brought the other 2 back for like a encore because. We lost a bunch of metal and then found it later. Luckily, things like that don't happen anymore because we actually have an ERP system. But in the old days, it was possible for us to lose, 3 or 4 or 500, complete chassis, which is fairly amazing when you think about it. But those came back. We built them out, and that worked. But I'm constantly surprised by what works and what doesn't. I figured, Sin would be a big deal. It hasn't been. It's been selling okay, but it's not lighting the world on fire. Saga 2 is doing really well, and I'm like, well, that's a little surprising. because I mean a small kind of oddly spec'd preamp, is doing well. But the big surprise on the positive side would be Mjolnir 3. Because when I did that, I figured no one wants this stupid thing. It's too big. It runs way too hot. It kind of vibrates a bit. No one in the right mind wants this. No, we can't build them fast enough, pretty much literally. There finally appears to be calming down. I think they're finally in stock. But yeah, we sold probably 10 times as many as I thought. I guess because it does sound good. And that's why we did it, but it is not the most convenient product. And hopefully we can, do something that encompasses a percentage of that, but in a more, sane form factor.
Now, you were saying, the way it sounds. We've discussed, I believe, and you're not super shy about measurements and how it sounds. Mm-hmm. If you guys want to hear more of that kind of flushed out, I'm sure you can check out our other podcasts. I have a more specific, again, we're about specific questions this podcast for you. Do you feel that really well measuring gear on your end sounds drier than what you could maybe make if it wasn't flat?
I think it's an overgeneralization, but it definitely has a lack of character. And of course, a lot of people are going to say, well, then if it has its own character, then it's wrong. A true piece of audio gear will have no character, and it's like, well, the problem is, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Because you can say it's dry, or it's crispy, or it's thin, or whatever. But that's all kind of like tonal stuff. The thing that really strikes me on a really good amp like Mjolnir 3 is it's got dynamics, and it's really kind of hard. You can't really measure dynamics. All our measurements are steady state, but it's got like a punch and an impact and an aliveness that you don't necessarily get with other designs. And Mjolnir, it doesn't measure bad, but it doesn't measure great. It's really not fantastic. But, we have other stuff that measures pretty good and has a bit of that. It seems to come down to, if you're going to throw a bunch of feedback at something, it will end up sounding a certain way. It'll measure well, and it'll sound a certain way. There are going to be exceptions to this rule, of course. But we prefer to keep the level of feedback down, and we prefer to actually shoot for something that sounds, punchy and dynamic. We've had some people say, your stuff is too dynamic. And I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible. And I also go, have you been to like live music lately? I mean, like real live music, like unamplified, like dude with a guitar or something. And have you actually considered how dynamic that is versus what you're listening to? So, but that's my proselytization for the day.
So okay. So then one more very specific question. Then you mentioned punchiness, and we talked about this in person, but I'm pretty sure we haven't talked about it on the podcast. Very specific, product specific here question. The Azure 2, I had the pleasure of listening to that right alongside the Azure 1. To my experience, just my experience, this term you use, punchier. The Azure 2, it felt punchier. And when I asked you about it specifically, you did have some comments about the design that might have attributed to that. Can you elaborate on all that? Why maybe I might have heard a bigger, I'm not going to use the word dynamic, but if nothing else, a punchier sound from the Azure 2 compared to the Azure 1?
Yeah, and a couple things. One is Azure 2 is just capable of much greater current output. It has two sets of outputs per channel instead of one, like the original Azure. So it's got, it's got more, meat, so to speak. It has more current capability. Power supply is the same, but you have double the number of outputs. The other is it's got our weird little tricky thing called Halo on it, which is our way of trying to incorporate the driver into the feedback loop in such a way that the amp will, it'll essentially do kind of a motion sampling and try to compensate for what the driver's doing. this is all very hand wavy because we don't have a bunch of measurements to show what this does. There are people that will argue the pros and cons of it. We tried it, seemed to sound better. We said, it's a relatively inexpensive amp. Let's throw it in there and see. And everyone liked it, so it got Halo. That's kind of that simple sometimes with us.
Today's episode of the Occasional Podcast is sponsored by Purist Audio Design. Quality audio deserves quality sound, like the purest of diamonds. Purist Audio Design, one of the originals in high-end, just launched their Diamond Revision. With improved metallurgy, flexibility, and enhanced shielding to protect your system from RFI, EMI, interference from noisy wireless devices, the Diamond Revision, just like all of Purist cables, is made right here in the US of A. For over 35 years, Purist Audio Design has passionately made high-end, handcrafted audio cables designed specifically for the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PuristAudioDesign.com. Purist Audio Design is veteran-owned and available worldwide. So I have this question I thought of last night before our interview here, and I feel like it's kind of related to what you're saying here. You mentioned like a couple of your features, a couple of your changes. When you think about the next amp, the next version, are you constantly looking for new technology, or are you kind of looking to improve upon previous design options? So one of the things that you did, I think, with the tier was you added in a big feature, which was the choke. You said it was big, used heavy, and this choke feature is something that has been around, but now you're implementing it in. Are you like looking to improve with old tech, or are you looking for new tech, or how do you like kind of figure out what you're going to do next when it comes to like this Epsiode 2, Epsiode 3 tier kind of amplifier situation?
Yeah, both really. And to be clear, no Epsiode 3 coming, please. There's two. There's only two of them so far, and I haven't thought about the new one yet. But no, I have no problem picking up from old technology. You just got to know where it's best used. Tier is great for a choke because it was considered a cost no object product for us. All the audiophiles out there, don't laugh because a pair of them is like $3,300, and you're like, that's a pair of cables. It's like, no, it's our cost no object monoblock amps, two of them, but it's considered cost no object. So putting a 10-pound, $100 chunk of metal into an amp makes sense there. That's old tech. The main reason people don't do it anymore is it's heavy, it's expensive. No one in their right mind wants to do this. It does actually, to me at least, sound better. It's an energy storage device like a capacitor. It's storing it in a magnetic field rather than in an electronic field in the capacitor. And so that makes sense. On the other hand, there's a lot of new tech that we work with. Not so much in the realm of DACs or Class D or anything like that. What's currently accepted as new tech, but we use a lot of new devices. If you actually look at the discrete devices we use, a lot of people have designed audio for a long time. They'll look at it and go, what the heck is that? And it's like, it's a weird device that we found, and we measured it and we liked it, and so we use it. And they're like, well, that's not really an audio device. That's like for power or switching. It's like, yeah, and it works great for audio too. It's not, the data sheet is not always going to tell you exactly what it's good for. And at the same time, we do engage in new technology. As of next year, you'll be having what we call our singular DACs, which are it's a play on one bit. They are not one bit. But it's a delta sigma topology. You'll be getting that. We've done unison. Singular is based on an FPGA implementation. The new Goonier is going to end up with what we're calling multiform, which is a whole new way of doing multi-bit DACs using like the DACs we've used, but with a different analog section. So we play around with a lot of things, and we do a lot of kind of pie in the sky things. We have a full-time PhD. All she does is like algorithms, and you're going to finally see more of that in the next few years. She did the original Unison. She did the original gadget that we showed, and we're finally going to have a product based on that. And she's doing a bunch of other digital stuff that I can't talk about yet. So we new, old, whatever. I mean, hell, we have two or three desktop products based on tubes, and two or three, rack products based on tubes, which, of course, is insane because they're hot, they're old, they're getting scarce. They measure like ass, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the arguments against tubes, but some people, including me, really like the way they sound, so we do some tube stuff.
I'm just kind of realizing, too, now, of all the people I interview for this show and really talk about, you seem to place the least amount of faith in a very specific thing and a more general sense of, like, a lot of things can sound very good. Mm-hmm. Like you're saying, or at least you don't try to put your heavy preference into what could be possible for someone else. Because there's a lot of people who like swear by these very specific technologies from the design standpoint, and I got a guy who says, I don't think he would even argue with me on this, that the 300B tube is the best and only way to listen to music. Like this very specific niche thing, and he only makes 300B tubes, and that's what he thinks sounds best. And so I guess in a way, what I'm trying to say is I appreciate your openness to not only what you've made being the right choice, but also looking at what else might be out there to kind of bring people in, to bring tech in, because I think it's a fair statement to say a lot of what audio and hi-fi has become is tech that is many years old. And I am working through a review right now of a fantastic sounding speaker that still uses untreated paper cones.
Yeah.
Which is basically like the same tech that's been around for, I don't know, since the advent of the speaker, probably.
Yeah, and it still sounds quite good, or it can.
That one does sound quite good.
it can sound quite good. I've heard good and bad, and that's the thing. I mean, people are like, "You're anti-Class D." It's like, no, we try Class D all the time. It's just it hasn't gotten to the point where we want to use it. So again, we may be crazy, and that's okay. I would much rather, play around with my continuity and my weird Class A stuff and things like that than Class D at this point in time. That doesn't mean we'll never do a Class D thing. By the way, that's also not a hint that a Class D thing is coming. There's nothing. You
got to say that. The people that love Jason online, you guys might think, but they are just the questions. There's so many people in the forums saying, "What, Jason? What?"
No, I mean, it's really, we'll try it. We'll try a lot of different things. I mean, I'm actually quite happy with the sound we're getting out of, like, the ESS DACs. And, I say that to Mike and Dave. Oh, guys, it's not multi-bit. It's not that. I was, yeah, I know. It sounds good. So every year or so we try some new form of Class D. We're trying some new TI stuff right now. And, it's better. I don't think it's us. By trying, it doesn't mean that there's a product. I mean, anyone who knows this, knows the singular DAC we showed, 2 years ago, and we're finally going to have one, like, next year sometime, and that's, like, something we were really working on. This is like, we're just playing around with it. We'll see how it goes. But, yeah, I like to try a lot of different things because I don't think I know everything. I also, I don't really have a dog in this fight. It's like... I don't want to speak ill of any other companies, but like when a company is like, well, this is our technology that, by the way, we want to sell to everyone else too. It's like, well, you got a pretty powerful financial incentive to say this is the best Whereas I'm like, I'll just use what's relevant for this, or I'll use tubes because it's funny, and I like the way they look, and it's not always, hot as balls here in Texas, believe it or not. It is, let's see, it's only 80, wow, it's only 83 here today. That's pretty amazing.
Get your sweater out, Jason. I don't want you to be cold.
That's all right. It's 83, and I'm sure 100% humidity. So don't worry. San Antonio is a little more livable.
Yeah. Well, it's been hot up here too, and I've just been surprised how I bought a lot of San Francisco clothes that I haven't been able to wear yet. I was deceived heartily. You have an openness for new tech. You're looking for new things. Is there anything that like you felt like you've said over the years in terms of tech you haven't used? I think you never really produced the DSD DAC.
Right.
You haven't really produced a Class D amp yet, or it's not where you want. Is there anything that you kind of feel like it says when you don't endorse something? You're saying, wow, it's not good for us, but like, there hasn't been a surround sound codec amp either from you guys, like a home theater codec amp.
Yeah.
These are like, in a way, they were little statements on your part. Do those kind of say anything to like a greater picture for you?
A little bit. I can't tell you how many times people are like, you could do like a little like mini Ragnarok with a TI 3255 Class D module, and you could sell a ton of them. It's like, yeah, we could. Yeah, absolutely. I don't really want to do that. It's part stubbornness. It's part I don't think it sounds right, at least to us.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that someone can't make some kind of magic thing with it, but it's not us. Also, we work on a lot of things. I need to put some walls somewhere, or else I'll just end up literally will end up making toasters or toilets or something. So I need to say let's not look at this right now. In terms of standards, you know how I feel about standards. Audio standards are usually, it gets back to like, if it's the only thing you make and you're selling it to someone else, I'm suspicious of standards, and I'm suspicious of, if it really is better or not. That's my own inherent thing. DSD. It was locked up with Sony. MQA was locked up with an offshoot of Meridian. The Dolby stuff is its own morass of crazy. Honestly, if I was them, I'd be worried that people are now going to be convolving like Atmos on my phone or on my sound bar with like a real serious like Atmos system. A serious Atmos system can sound fantastic, but it's like, wait, don't I have that on my phone? It's like, you guys might need to work on segmenting this. But, that's the old marketer talking. But I also don't like the fact it's like, I go to them and say, yeah, I'd like to license this. Like, come in the back. Let's talk about this. I don't want to talk about it. I want to look at your price list. If we ever had something to license, I swear, I would just go, here's the price list. This is what it costs for everyone. No, there's no backroom deals. Take it or leave it. Don't care. And we would probably be unsuccessful with that because I think a lot of people wouldn't trust it. But that's all right. We don't have anything to license anyway, so it's not that big a deal at this point in time.
You kind of talked about a little the idea that you're crazy, you're stubborn, and a lot of these things you do might not make a ton of fiscal sense, but maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you have like part of these things is about your passion projects, or maybe like an ROI experiment. Like, do you view it that way? Like, this product's an experiment. I want to learn something from its. Is there value in like in your own learnings as a company? Not necessarily but you're willing to risk some ROI to learn something?
You have to. I mean, it's like it's a totally different mindset. I was talking to one of our employees the other day, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm thinking about starting a business, and I need to understand what this is about, and what's it really like." And it's a really different thing where it's like, okay, if you're employed by someone, you're a really bad year, you might not get a raise. And a really good year, they might go, 6%, or whatever. Take cost of living and X2, or you go to another job and you go for more money. I said during my tenure at Schiit and Centric, there have been years that are fantastically mind-blowingly great. And there have been years where we're literally below the poverty line. Like, actually, we've lost a lot of money, And you just you got to roll with the punches. And if you're not ready for that, it's really tough to get into it. So, doing a product, and seeing if it's going to go anywhere. Doing a few of them, and see if it's going to go anywhere. Pricing it, what it would normally be if you built 1,000 or 5,000 of them. Sure, that makes total sense. It's not that terrible to develop a product. You do have to keep in mind regulatory stuff. If it's a DAC, you got to do FCC, things like that. But a lot of it you can experiment and you can see what people like. Products has to be safe, still has to be reliable, still has to et cetera, et cetera. But it's not that huge of a gamble. Now, if you go and tool up, if I said, oh, well, I know that sin is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Let's make 100,000 of them. Guess what? We're in big trouble because you're not going to move though. So you don't make the big bets. But what you need to be able to do is scale up, the small bets that actually take off. And so, yeah, we do a lot of experimental things. A lot of it is whim, and a surprising amount of it has made it into the product line. Our EQs. I mean, I had no idea we'd be making 3 analog EQs when we started. It's like that sounds completely bonkers, but they're good and solid and sell quite well and steadily. So I don't know.
From your talks with the people who buy your products, do you think there is an element of like the anti-traditional audiophile embedded in them, or is it more to you? I'm either a beginner or a budget audiophile, or and there's nothing wrong with this. Like, am I just someone who has to be more budget conscious because I can't afford $100,000 speakers, which is most of us, right?
Yeah.
Or is there a thing where it's like, I just feel like a lot of this stuff is overpriced, and I like what Jason's saying about this particular subject because you don't really come off as like a person, at least from my experience, that hates the high end. But I think you acknowledge the fact, rightfully, that a lot of stuff is very, very expensive for the common man to afford in the hobby.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people like we focus on really the performance and the value, rather than like how crazy can this chassis be? Can we mill it out of
that is a thing.
Solid titanium, and have inlays of actual gold. It's like great. I mean, that's fantastic, but if you're talking a $50,000 or $100,000 amplifier, I'm like, no, that's a car. To me, that's a car. To me, and I think to most people, that's a car. It might even be a house. If it's $100K and there are parts of Corpus where you could buy a place to live for that. No, so we have a different approach. We're less about how crazy can it be, and more about how much of this true, like kind of no compromise, crazy stuff can we put into it and keep it sane? It's like, I love to use the example of all the preamps. Every single preamp we do actually has a relay ladder volume control. And relay ladder volume is literally the best thing you can possibly do. It has perfect channel matching. It's just switches in the signal path. You can't even measure the distortion on an APX 555 off of it. I mean, it is literally the best thing you can do. And it doesn't cost that much. And you see these, some other products that are very, very expensive that I won't name, that like these like volume control chips. I'm like, what? That belongs in a phone. Why is it not relays? So it's like, oh, people don't like it makes clicking noises. Okay, sure, that's a valid thing. Me personally, I like the fact that it sounds perfect when the clicking stops because you don't sit there and adjust the volume all the time. That's a personal thing, and that's the kind of thing we shoot for without putting it into some cast copper titanium alloy thing. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you can afford it, knock yourself out. I won't begrudge you your Bugatti or your very expensive audio gear. If that's your thing, great. But it's not mine.
This is a kind of a random question I came across, but I thought I would throw it out there to a couple guys this season. I've spent some time with you in social situations. Do you have any goals or an ideal party that would be like the greatest party to you? What would make the greatest party for Jason Stoddard in your mind?
Oh, God, everyone would hate it because it would just be a bunch of smart people talking about stuff. Not necessarily any music, not necessarily any, any kind of fashion thing. It's just like, let's talk about some wacky ideas, and the smartest people you could get together. And let's talk about, how to change the world, for better or worse or whatever. I'd love to really game it out and see what we could do. But that's not a party to most people. That's a bunch of idiots sitting around, talking. I mean, we could throw some decent wine or beer in there.
There you go.
That's good. But yeah, other than that, I'm a boring kind of person, man. I may look young, but I'm actually kind of boring.
I think you're far too humble. I know a lot of boring people, Jason, and you are not one of those people. So you can take some solace in that. Okay, so one of the things that I have going on right now is I have two, what I think most people would consider very, let's just say mid-tier amplifiers. I got about a $7,000 amp in, and then I have a pre that's $2,000 in right now. That's above the general price point that you kind of operate in. But the point of me bringing this up is both of these amps, if you want to change the volume, you got to stand up, walk over to the thing, and turn it. And I want to say, for the record, it doesn't bother me in the least. I can go up there and change the thing, but they are high-end-ish, audiophile amplifiers that lack a remote control. What's your kind of take on that, and what do you kind of feel like you have going on in that space?
Yeah, it's a bold choice to not have a remote control. We got eviscerated when we actually introduced the first Ragnarok without remote. Everyone's like, why did you do that? Are you crazy? And I'm like, oh, that's right. I was thinking about it as a desktop product, like for headphones. So it just literally right over my head. Didn't even think about it. We introduced it, and someone said remote, and I'm like, fudge. Yeah, he's absolutely right. So since then, everything that we can has had a remote control. Freyas and Sagas and things like that. The big EQ has one, which has led to the other problem with remotes, which is, there are people like 3D printing racks to put like 5 of our remotes in because it's one remote per product. So, this is the Iggy one, and this is the one for a Loki Max, and this is the one for my Freya. And I see that, and I'm like, this is just painful to look at. And of course, you're probably going to say, well, get a universal remote, right?
Get a universal remote, Jason.
Yeah, have you used one?
Yeah, they're terrible.
I did a PowerPoint thing to start this out. Don't throw up. That's kind of like, remotes suck. And no remotes. You started actually early. No remote sucks because you got to get up. Remotes suck because you end up with a million of them sitting on the coffee table in front of you. You don't know what you have. Universal remotes suck because they're hard to program, and actually there's some things that really they don't actually cover or don't cover well, and they have so many buttons on them you don't know what the heck you're even pressing. And then app-based remotes can suck, and they could either try to do too much or too little, or they're slow or whatever. Everyone's had some experience with that, and so because it really pained me to see everyone using all our remotes. Having a unified remote, which we thought about actually doing, a unified custom remote, is a really bad idea, because what happens when you add more products, right? Mm-hmm. Then suddenly it's non-unified, and so someone spent a lot of money for that. We had a guy wander in to see us who had this great idea for a unified remote control app-based system. And I was very skeptical. I was extremely skeptical. I'm like, yeah, I've seen this movie before. I know how this comes out. And what he did is, in 5 minutes, he showed me something I'd never seen before, which was a truly unified, like, app-based system that did not need to be paired. You didn't have to create an account. You just basically turn it on. It finds all the products. If you turn off one of the products, it disappears. It stacks them all into a logical stack. It worked like you used the product. And I'm like, okay then. Looks like we're going to be an app company. So, instead of being the true evil people like you see in a movie, you steal the idea and you take it. We actually hired him. And he's been working on this now for, I think, about a year and a half. We've been actively using an app to control multiple products for, since the beginning of the year now. This is what we are calling Forkbeard. It's the son of Bluetooth. So it is a Bluetooth-based unified control system. And in fact, as far as I know, this is the only unified product control system that is multi-product and multi-system or multi-stack. So you can actually create like a stack for your bedroom, stack for your living room, stack for your garage, whatever, and you can control all of that. And that's relevant because most people who have our gear actually have 2 or more systems, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're going to say, well, that's great, but does it work with everything? And I've seen this before, and people bring out one product and it has an app, or has 2 products, and maybe they have an app. And so it's actually launching with 8 products. So you can actually you can create some really nice stacks. You can take a Saga 2 and put it with a Vidar 2F, and that is a perfectly good fork-bearded stack. Or you can do what we're calling the Giga stack, which is a Kara F or a Freya Plus F with a Gungnir 2 and a Wotan. And so all of those then have unified control, but not just control. It also has system health, visibility, and power output. So it will tell you if one of your tube heaters is out. It will tell you if the amp has gone over current or over temperature. It will show you in real time how much power the amp's putting out. You'll be able to tell if it's in Class A or not. There's a lot more stuff when you get a unified system that you can do. And so that's the big, scary, weird thing that I've been hinting at all year. It's like, we got something really big and really strange, and it will change everything in how we work, because it does hit 8 products, 2 new products, 2 products already out in the world have it. No one's really mentioned, why is there a weird shaped hole in the back of a Saga 2 or a Kraken, but they actually have that. And then we're updating 4 other products. We're doing Kara, Freya, Azure, and Vidar. So all of those will be fork-bearded, and they all take a little external common module that just plugs into the back. If you don't want fork-beard, cool, don't get it. You'll save $50. If you want it, it comes with it by default. And then you just download an iOS app. Sorry, not Android yet. Working on it. Much apologies. Want to get it right on one first, and then deal with the rest later. And then it will allow you to literally you turn it on. It shows you what's there. You add it to 1 or more stacks. You create the stacks you want, and then you happily sit there and control it and see if there's anything wrong with it. And a lot more stuff coming in the future, but that's a good start. And that's our big weird announcement that I've been hinting at.
Yeah, I love that Class A measurement thing. I think for those who don't know, a lot of times when something is considered Class AB, you never really know how much of the Class A you generally get. I don't know if, because it's not measurable usually. I don't know if Class A is this teeny little bit or if it's a very large section. And to have that measurability, that's a pretty cool thing. I have not heard of that before. And I have definitely heard that there's a certain amount of wattage that you might get Class A before it passes in, but no one has ever said, like, well, how does that exactly translate to my speaker? And then my listening experience. Like, is it possible we're all running around with some type of misconception about what Class A is really capable of because we've never measured it?
We are. And here's the thing. We came up with that just in the process of using it. We've been using this actually internally quite a bit, and it's great because you know exactly what's going wrong with the product. We do it during burn-in, and you can just watch, what are the temperatures, what are the currents, all this stuff. It is fantastic for that. But while we were developing it, our head developer, Martin, he's like, well, there's something wrong with the measurement on my Azure 2. I said, what do you mean? He's like, it's not moving. We had a power output. We have basically VU meters, on the amp, so you can see how much power it's putting out. He's like, it's not moving. He says, I'm cranking it up. It's not moving at all. And I'm like, oh, that's right. That thing has about 5 watts of Class A bias. It might not move at all until the very, very end. And he's like, no, I'm like really cranking the heck out of this into like he had some KEF speakers that were fairly low impedance. And I'm like, well, it may still be in Class A. And so we did some testing, and it's like, it stays in Class A a lot longer than you think. And we had to change the readout on that to say it's in Class A or it's not, rather than a more like a standard VU meter like you get in VIDAR, where it's like it's putting out about this much power and getting near its limit. But just being able to see where the amp's getting near its limit, or if it's running hot or whatever. Or in the case of Wotan, the state of the fans, because Wotan actually has fans. They're normally off, but you can tell what percentage they're running, things like that. It's a real game changer, and it's fantastic for development. It really ends a lot of questions in development. We just plug it in. It's like, what should it be running? Well, they're all running about like this, and that makes sense. I managed to avert a very bad thing with a product that was sitting on my desk. I joked earlier about, our prototypes can catch on fire on your desk. Yeah, I kept watching, the temperature climb and climb and climb. I'm like, I need to turn that off right now, and I did and saved it. But it's really a different ballgame. And with 8 products, you can actually create, a number of systems from about, I think the least expensive system will be about $1,200-ish, and then the most expensive. Hilariously, you can still get the Giga Stack for under $5,000. That's 3 products from us, So there you go. High value.
High value. Yeah. Sounds awesome. Jason, any other products you want to talk about right here at the end, or is that it for our reveals?
Oh, I think that's enough. There's going to be a lot of questions about that, the Wotan, the Gungnir 2 stuff. We didn't really get into multi-form or what the heck that is. It's a new multi-bit trick that we're doing now. But yeah, it's going to be a big relief to get this thing out in the world, because we've been using it internally. It will really change the game as far as being able to use the system in a unified manner, and also understanding how the system's working. Is it working right? Is it working well? Does this work well with my speakers? Etc. And right now it's still up in the air, but we're probably going to allow people to share with us diagnostic data on a one-time shot. Like if they have a problem with an amp, it's like, hey, if you want to share the diagnostics with us, that will help us figure out what's going on. but it won't be. It does not take data. We do not have account. You do not create an account. It's not tied to you in any way. So it's just a very, very simple control system. I mean, literally download it, turn it on, find products, add them. It's that easy.
And then you said you have the capability to press a button and they all turn into robots and kill everyone. Is that what you're saying?
Working on that. Yeah, no, that'll be the next the 2.0.
He's in cahoots with AI. Jason's in cahoots with AI.
Oh yeah, it's really funny because early on we had some people saying, "Oh, imagine what you could do with like machine learning in this." I'm like, no, let's not imagine what we could do with machine learning in this, because you could do some fairly evil things. I mean, if you wanted to take data, you could say, "Hey, we know you're running up at the top range of that amp all the time. It might be time to consider the new, more powerful one."
Right.
Yeah. We won't be doing that, to be clear. But it will actually help answer the question, is this amp enough for my speakers? And since we sell...
Right, that's exactly what I was getting at. Is this, I don't even enough, but you could say, is this a good synergy for my speakers in a more technical form than me just saying, I think it sounds good, right? This is a real value saying, hey, I have something I can look at and say, hey, how are we doing? What is the status of this? Is the power enough? Am I pushing it too hard? That's something unattainable up until this point. That's why it would be cool, right?
Yeah. When we started this, I was like, why would you even put it in an amp? And then I realized, wait, we have sensors in the amp for like temperature and current and status and things like that. They have a shutdown mode. In the case of Wotan, you can change it from overall feedback to no overall feedback. There's a bunch of things you can do in an amp, and I'm actually most excited about it being in the amp now because it lets me really see what the heck it's doing. And that's why
Wait, did you say you'll be able to turn the feedback on and off? Or it just...
Yeah, in Wotan. Yeah, only in Wotan.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But we're going to actually put it on Yallerhorn, which might surprise people. But it's actually probably most useful in Yallerhorn. That's a low power amp. It's 10 watts a channel, and it's surprising how capable it is. And you can actually see it, And it's not for everyone, but it's for a lot more people than you might think. So at that point, then you could do that in a Saga 2, and you have like a $500-ish, completely fully controlled stack, of real gear made in the U.S. So there you go. And hopefully, just to reiterate, we'll have Android eventually. I'm working on it, but gotta do Apple first. Just let's get it right, and then we'll expand it.
Hey Jason, thanks so much for coming on. We always appreciate it when you join us on the show here and all your little insights. It's awesome.
No, it's always fun talking to you because you have great questions, and it actually makes me think about things I want to do in the future too.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes PartTimeAudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and Audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. The Occasional Podcast and its original associated music is monitored, mixed, and mastered on the Focal Trio 6 BE Studio monitors. AI songs produced by Udio.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.